Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new, I'm glad to have you here. My name is Frank Kennedy and today I am reviewing the new movie Dune. This concludes a series of videos I've done related to Dune previously. Some of you may be aware I did a three-part reaction to Dune the book. Today we're going to look at the film, which is something we want to think about separate from the book for the most part, although I'll do a little bit for the hardcore fans of the book in terms of what you might expect as we go through it. There's always that question that comes up that people have, which was better, the book or the movie? I don't want to get too much into that today, except to say that both have tremendous merits and both have their issues, but I do want to kind of narrow the focus down to the film. And what I hope that you will do is please add your comments below. I love it if you would like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll do a lot of reviews of books and then the films that are based upon those books. So please stick with me. So I'm going to look at the film today from three different perspectives. One, what it might mean to those who in fact know the source material, the book, how it works just as a piece of cinema, and then I want to discuss the one big haunting problem with this film that I do think could be an issue for its longevity. So let's talk about how to approach this film. Now, I've read the book multiple times. I'm not a hardcore lover of the book. I admire the book, but it wasn't some kind of transformative experience for me. But I understand the important themes of the story. And so I came into this film knowing this was going to be big, explosive, it was going to be loud and in your face, and I also figured it was going to be very faithful to the source material. So I tried to temper my expectations, didn't want to come in like a fanboy and, oh my God, this is going to be the greatest thing ever. But, wanted to be kind of a sort of step backish. And so I have to say that if you are a fan of the book, I don't see how you could possibly be disappointed by what this film has done. It is incredibly loyal to the story, such as is told, because this is not the entire book. We know that going in, and if you didn't, then be prepared for that. And I'm going to talk later on about why that might also be a problem for this film. But it absolutely does a great job of playing out the storyline and also gives us a little bit more that sort of lays the groundwork of the universe in the beginning without getting into any kind of lengthy exposition. The previous iterations of Dune on film have had tons of exposition to try to explain this complex universe, and today I thought with this version that the writing does a beautiful job of kind of guiding us through without making us just stop and listen to some long speech to explain, well, they're doing this over here because that's happening over there, and yada, 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 this, that, and the other. We didn't have any of that. So as far as book lovers go, I think you're going to be satisfied with what you see. Now, what about as a piece of film, as cinema? Purely for the visceral experience, the sights, the sounds, the acting, the writing, this is really quite a remarkable piece of work. And I will tell you two things. One, this is clearly intended for an adult audience. It has often been considered Star Wars for adults, so to speak. Not that there's any problem with, adults watching Star Wars, because I'll watch me some Star Wars quite a bit. But there's no question that this is not going to probably appeal to a very young audience. Children are not going to be entertained by this film. It takes its jolly good time to allow the world to develop so that you can have this immersive effect. The other part of it, which is, I think, a little bit intriguing and at times challenging, is the musical score. Music, of course, vital part of big epic films, especially science fiction and fantasy. And Hans Zimmer's score is unique. I've never heard anything like it before in film. but it is also very, very loud. And there are some moments where it literally washes out a line or two of dialogue. And I know in one case it was actually an important line, the line that those of you who've read the book know, and for the Father, nothing. I could barely detect it coming from Jessica's mouth as the music rose above her, and there were a couple of other times where lines, I have no idea. I literally had to go back and watch it again to figure out what the lines were. That should never happen in a film, period. That should be dealt with in post-production. The music should never distract from dialogue because sometimes that dialogue is pretty critical. Now, I talked about this being a film for adults. This is a very serious film, at times even maybe a little pretentious, but we know the stakes are incredibly high, and there's no doubt of that from the get-go. Visually, you are immersed in a truly believable world. This never feels like Hollywood going into space. This really feels like you are on Caladan, you are on Giedi Prime, and then ultimately on Arrakis. It feels like it. Denis Villeneuve, the director, said that he was enormously influenced by the amazing film Lawrence of Arabia, a film, by the way, if you haven't seen it, you must. And it truly was astounding, and you can tell, also set in the desert, by the way, and you can tell from the grand vistas here just how influenced he was. This is a big, bold, expansive epic. This means you need to see it on the biggest screen you can. IMAX preferably, but do not allow your first viewing to be on HBO Max. I know a lot of people are a little wary about going into the theaters because of COVID. Wear your mask, you'll be fine. Sit away from people, you'll be all right. But see this on the big screen. It does make all the difference. I cannot imagine right now somebody watching this on a tablet, for instance, or gosh forbid, even a phone. Oh my goodness. This is a film that requires big. Now, what about the acting? What about the characters? The acting is fine throughout. I think everybody does a very, very solid job. I think Stellan Skarsgård is very menacing as the Baron Harkonnen. Probably of the three iterations through cinematic or television versions, his is the best. But really, except for Paul Atreides and his mother Jessica, we really don't get very close to any of these characters, which is very similar to the book in that regard. And I think that while that's great, I think it can also be limiting for audiences because characters enter, they appear to be important, and then when they leave the story or die, as many do, you don't really feel a whole lot because you really have not gotten a chance to get to know them or care. And I think a great example of this is actually in the climax. I'm not going to talk about what happens, but those of you who are hardcore readers of the book will remember the fight scene involving Jameis of the Fremen. And that actually is the climactic event that comes right before the end of the film. Jameis is a character. He is new in the story, very late, and is engaged in this important fight with Paul. And the outcome of this fight simply does not have the kind of gravitas you would expect of this moment simply because the character of Jameis is completely new. You know nothing about this character. The director does a nice job of trying to elevate the humanity of the characters here, but it doesn't really come across as particularly profound or emotional in any way. Timothée Chalamet is Paul Atreides. He is absolutely Paul Atreides. He's the way you imagine Paul in the books. He is brilliant in the role, and I think we will see, if there is ever a second film made, we'll see him really elevate his game even more so there. And so we're with him just about every scene, and I love the way that we are allowed into his mind. He has these visions of what is to come, including a vision of a grand jihad that will span the galaxy and kill vast numbers of people in his name. And this is something that conflicts him throughout the story because he does not want this to happen. And so I was actually really glad that we were able to get into that because that was something that I think is really kind of key to the internal conflict of the character. But by and large, most of the other characters are somewhat distant. Gurney Halleck is played by Josh Brolin. Leto Atreides, Oscar Isaac, just kind of not, they're fine, but you're really not engaging with them. And one of the real problems I have with this film, and it elevates a problem I already had in the book, we have a traitor within House Atreides, a single man who brings down the house by rendering bringing down the shield wall and therefore leaving the House of Atreides defenseless. He is very, very limited in his role in this film. We only see him briefly in a couple of spots. And so when he is revealed as the traitor, you're like, okay, so that guy. We don't know anything about him. Now, in the book, we actually learn a lot about him. He's actually quite prominent. And in fact, in the book, he tells us very early on, he's going to betray the Atreides, which is not good for suspense. However, here he is so much in the background that there really is not much emotional resonance to the treachery. And quite frankly, his death is so pointless that really the whole story is rendered kind of strange, that a massive house like this, of this vast fiefdom, would fall because of the act of one man trying to get revenge because of what happened to his wife. So that didn't really work for me, and then again, it didn't really work for me in the book either, so there's that. Overall, though, this is a very strong piece of work. Now, the biggest problem here is its biggest strength. Denis Villeneuve is clearly taking his time to tell this story and being as loyal to the source material as he can. I applaud him. This is for adults. He does not take your intelligence for granted. He believes you're a smart audience. You can pay attention. You can become immersed in it. Great. He respects the audience. Love it. This isn't your typical like Marvel film where it's joke, joke, kill, kill. This is a very, very serious film. But it's half the story. And that is its fundamental problem, where it ends off. Now, as of this review on October 22nd, Warner Brothers has not greenlit a sequel to this film that would finish the book. This is very strange, I think, because the film has actually been out overseas for many weeks. It's done reasonably well at the box office, but it seems clear that Warner Brothers is waiting to see what the American box office does to get this film greenlit. Now, one of the things that I think is problematic here, I remember about 20 years ago watching the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Ring. Knew it was going to be 3 films, and it ends with our 2 main characters, Sam and Frodo, walking off in the distance to the next stage of their journey. Well, this film ends with our main characters walking off into the distance for the next stage of their journey. Except we don't know that we're going to get the rest of that journey. Lord of the Rings were filmed back to back to back. Those films had been shot before the first one came into the cinema. We knew when the second and third ones were coming out. We knew we were watching the beginning of a longer story. We don't know that that's going to happen. Now, I would think probably it will get greenlit, but even if it does, with the expanse that would be involved in filming this thing, it may be a good 3 or 4 years down the line before we would see a sequel. So it's going to be intriguing. And I do really wonder about just how big the audience is going to be for this film. So my experience was there were about 60 or 70 people in the theater. I'm pretty sure there was no one under the age of 30 in that theater. Most look like me, guys in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, who probably were all readers of the book, science fiction nerds, that kind of thing. That ain't the audience that you're going to have if you're going to have a big box office in this country. You've got to get a more mainstream audience. I did not see that. Now, granted, this was one theater, one showing on IMAX, so it may very well be that the younger audiences will come at earlier times. I certainly hope so. We'll see what happens as we go forward. I'm a little iffy about the durability, just the rewatchability of the film. I think, quite frankly, most casual fans aren't going to rewatch Dune. I think they're going to like the experience, but like a lot of other films that they liked, it's like, okay, let me see the next film. I don't think it's just something that's really going to stay in the hearts and minds of people for very long. It's a very good film, an excellent film, a visually spectacular film, but I don't think it's the transformative film that a lot of folks would like it to be, and part of it's because it's only half of the story, and we don't know that we're going to get the second half. So those are my thoughts. If you disagree, please leave comments. I love to hear them. And so until next time, bye-bye.